Our second keynote of the day is Dr. Nancy Gray, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Gordon Research Conferences. Hi. So it's a pleasure to introduce her. Nancy Ryan Gray is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Gordon Research Conferences. Nancy received her bachelor's degree in chemistry from the University of Notre Dame and her PhD in fuel chemistry from the Pennsylvania State University. Prior to joining GRC, Nancy served as the Director of Membership of the American Chemical Society and as a research specialist in organic chemistry at Exxon Production Research Company. Nancy has served on the board of directors of Ligand Pharmaceutical since August 2017. Ligand is a biopharmaceutical company focused on developing or acquiring technologies that help pharmaceutical companies in drug discovery, early stage drug development, and product reformulation. Nancy has also served the board of directors of Slater Technology Fund since May 2021. Slater is a non-for-profit seed fund dedicated to supporting new technology ventures founded by entrepreneurs to build companies that aim to achieve transformational impact in the industries or markets they serve. Nancy is also recognized for her efforts in establishing and growing the Gordon Research Seminars, which are two-day meetings designed specifically for early career scientists to present, I just lost my screen, to present and discuss research and build collaborative relationships with colleagues. She's also recognized for founding the GRC Power Hour initiative, GRC Power Hour initiative as a forum for conversations to promote inclusion and addressing the challenges of women and all underrepresented groups face in achieving equity in science. Goodness gracious, Nancy, I can talk all day about your accomplishments, but I would really love for people to actually hear you. So welcome to the Mariah Mitchell Women for Science Symposium. And for all of us, please join me in welcoming Nancy Ryan Gray.
Thank you very much. Well, as you can see from the title of my talk, it should convince you that by no means am I any expert in terms of the keys to success. However, I am fortunate enough, I'm lucky at, or yes, hold on one second. Let me do this again. Do you see all my slides?
No, we see just the beginning, your first slide.
Perfect, then I'm in good shape. All right. I am lucky, though, fortunately, that my keys are actually, has it changed? Okay, that my keys are actually in my purse and not somewhere much more inaccessible. What I'd like to do today, however, is to share with you my circuitous career path and a few of the many things that I have learned about success over the past 30 years. And I want to share with you these lessons that I've learned, things that I know now, but wish I had known back then. J. Paul Getty, the American industrialist billionaire, once said that the keys to success are rise early, work hard, and discover an oil well. But unfortunately, for most of us, it's just not that easy. Now, I was a young girl. My mother used to tell me that I was very good at knowing what I did not want to do. A young girl, as you can see, with extremely unruly hair. And my mom said that knowing what I didn't want to do included brushing that hair, setting the table, or cleaning my room. So number one that I've learned is decide what you don't want to do. I, for example, knew that I did not want to be an opera singer because basically I can't carry a tune and I don't look good in horns. I also knew that I did not want to play professional ice hockey because it just looked much too painful and I like my teeth. Now, by the time that I'd gotten to high school and had somewhat tamed that unruly hair, I began to realize what I actually was interested in. For example, I was interested in having a career. Now, this was back in the 1970s, and it was the height of the women's liberation movement. And shockingly, of all the courses I took in high school, I was both interested in and good at chemistry. Now, one of the most notable and famous female role models at the time was Margaret Thatcher, who was actually a research chemist before she became the first woman to serve as Prime Minister of Great Britain. And Margaret was quoted as saying, "Chemistry is the best training for life in the modern world." And so I figured if it was good enough for Margaret, it was good enough for me. So I went to college and decided to study chemistry. And as I sat in a class that looked nearly identical to this one, I learned lesson number 2. Learn to fail fast. For me, my failure and defeat was PChem, physical chemistry. I simply just did not understand it, no matter how hard I tried. And I spent an entire year obsessing about whether or not I would fail this course, become a college dropout, and ruin my life, which in retrospect was a colossal waste of time. I got a C, and it was a gift. But what I learned was that throughout your life, you will be required to struggle through things. And if you can't succeed the way that you want to, then just fail fast and move on, which is what I did. After 4 years, I had a degree, thank God, 2 job offers in the chemical industry, and a sinking sensation that I was not a real chemist. And so I went to graduate school. Now, Ron Azuma, when he was a graduate student at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, captured the essence of the graduate school experience by saying being a graduate student is like becoming all of the 7 dwarfs. In the beginning, you are shy, bashful, and stupid, dopey. In the middle, you're usually sick, sneezy, tired, sleepy, and irritable, grumpy. But in the end, they call you Doc, and then you're happy. One of the most important experiences that I had during graduate school was when my advisor sent me to my very first Gordon Research Conference. And it was here that I learned lesson number 3. You'll never know who you'll meet. This is me in the red circle with the big hair. And the 3 men shown by the yellow arrows would 15 years later serve on a board that would vote for my promotion to my first position in executive management. Now, the 2 men circled in yellow had a more immediate impact on my career. They are Jan de Leo from the Delft University of Technology with the beard, and Jaap Boon from the Foundation on Fundamental Research on Matter. And as intimidated as I was to attend my very first conference with the gods of my field, I managed to ask these 2 gentlemen a few questions about their research on sentiments during one of the poster sessions. And when the conference ended, I immediately went to the Florida Everglades to take samples for my own research. After 5 days in the swamps, my advisor called and told me to finish my sampling quickly because I would be leaving for Amsterdam for a year because I had been invited to be a visiting scientist in Jaap and Jan's lab. So lesson number 4 is to ask questions. Oops. And so as a result, I spent an entire year in Amsterdam generating huge amounts of interesting data on state-of-the-art equipment and drinking an awful lot of really good Dutch beer. When I finished my graduate degree, I took my first job at what was at the time the world's largest oil company, Exxon. And it was at Exxon that I learned lesson number 5 from my first section supervisor, H. Roger Melton, a petroleum engineer, the tall man on the left. And Roger said that the key to success is to be at the right place at the right time with the right bag of tools and to know how to use them. Now, Roger would admit that being at the right place and the right time was not necessarily under anyone's control. But having the right set of tools or competencies was your sole responsibility. Not only to have them, but to know how to use them to add value to your organization. At Exxon, everyone was technically competent. Competence in technical areas was a given. But what I learned was that I lacked some of the key skills necessary to succeed in business. Because as an undergrad and then in graduate school, we went from being taught a general understanding about a specific topic to having a very narrow expertise. And what I learned in industry was that you needed to flip the pyramid and to expand your skills to acquire a much broader range of competence. Now, there are a plethora of books that will describe what these skills and core competencies include. But I think those shown here have been the most important in terms of my career, because together they all lead to having technical expertise and credibility. And lesson number 6 is that credibility takes a long time to gain and a moment to lose. And Exxon learned that lesson very quickly in March of 1989, when a big ship hit a big rock in Alaska and created the Exxon Valdez oil spill. I was immediately assigned to the emergency response team to work on the oil spill. And it was there I was giving such interesting assignments as to count birds on outcrops, birds called the Alaskan common murre, which is a whole lot more difficult than it looks. And it was through that experience that I learned lesson number 7. Fish are smart and birds are stupid. And this is because fish, when they can see oil on water, can smell it, and they swim away as fast as their little fins will carry them. Birds, on the other hand, will continuously dive into oiled water. And why is that? Well, because they're stupid. So be a fish in your approach to life. Also, be a fish when it comes to taking performance feedback. So my very first year, having worked in the high pressure cooker environment of the Exxon Valdez, I was told by my supervisor, Nancy, you need to be more assertive. And exactly 1 year later, the same supervisor called me in and said, Nancy, you need to be less aggressive. So the lesson is take performance feedback seriously, but not literally. I also learned that while working at Exxon, that companies don't make decisions about anything. Your performance, your value, even your salary. It's people who make decisions. One of the people decisions my husband and I made at the time was to have our first son, Colin. And I also decided to get more involved with the local chapter of the American Chemical Society in Houston so that I could expand my networking and contacts. And as a result, I was sent to a workshop on public relations in Washington, D.C. And it was there that I relived lesson number 3. Remember what it was? You'll never know who you'll meet. There's me again in the yellow box. And the 2 women that are in the green boxes would one day hire me. The 4 women in the blue boxes would one day report directly to me. And the woman in the red box, Joan Shields, the ACS chairman of the board, would become a lifelong friend and mentor. So while I waited impatiently at Exxon for opportunities to move into management, I said to my husband, I think we should have 2 children. And boom, we had 2 children, our twins, Keenan and Kevin. And this is how I felt. A few months after the twins were born, my mother called me and said, Nancy, you have 3 children under the age of 3 and a PhD. How did this happen? And all I could say was, I don't know, Ma. So I did what any other sleep-deprived, diaper-changing career woman waiting for opportunities to move into management would do. I changed jobs. 9 months after the twins were born, I was offered the opportunity to take what I considered a sabbatical from industry and go to work for the American Chemical Society as a manager of the National Chemistry Week program. It was a public outreach program with the goal of communicating the importance of chemistry to the quality of our lives. And it was a job that was purely fun. I became known as the Queen of Slime and Pithy Phrases. Does anyone have the t-shirt that says, grab your goggles? That was me. But it also allowed me to become the kick-ass mom that I always wanted to be. Because instead of going into my kids' school to do lunch duty, I visited their classrooms every year and made banana hammers using liquid nitrogen or blew up pumpkins in the school parking lot. And I knew Bill Nye the Science Guy. I was the cool mom. And after 2 years of managing this program, I applied for a position of special assistant to the director of membership, which was a highly coveted role that was a fast track into senior management. And I got it. 6 months after moving into the position, the man who was the director of membership got promoted to become secretary of the society. And much to the surprise of my peers and of myself, I was selected to be the first woman to serve as membership director of the world's largest scientific society. And that's when I learned lesson number 11. If you want to run the zoo, you better know something about the animals. A simple translation is that in order to lead a group of people, you better understand them, their talents, their strengths, their challenges, and their needs. In my position as membership director, I found that I was responsible for over a $500 million budget, and I had never had a single finance course. So I decided that without actually asking the executive director to whom I reported, I applied to Harvard Business School's Senior Executive Management Training Program. figuring if I was rejected, no harm, no foul. But if I was accepted, he would have to let me go, wouldn't he? Well, I was, and he did. Remember lesson number 10? People, not companies, make decisions. And it was at Harvard that assigns all students to teams to analyze and develop solutions based upon real-world case studies that I learned lesson number 13. Find a way to work with everyone, even those people you may not like or who may not like you. In 2003, I had the opportunity to come full circle in my career when I was offered the chance to be GRC's first woman president and chief executive officer. And GRC is a phenomenal organization that serves all realms of science by holding conferences in the biological, chemical, and physical sciences and the interdisciplinary boundaries with engineering. That's me with the GRC Board of Trustees. And if you remember the boy that I had carried on my back, that's Colin now, and my twins, Keenan and Kevin. In addition to being a phenomenal organization, GRC has provided me with the opportunity to work with and meet some very, very important people, including the woman with the blonde hair, Frances Arnold, who is a member of my board and who won the 2018 Nobel Prize in Chemistry, as well as some celebrities. That's me with Kathy Bates, the Academy Award-winning actress, and who suffers from lymphatic disease and is a great proponent of our lymphedema Gordon Conference. But it also allowed me to initiate a program entitled the GRC Power Hour, and I know for some undergraduates that's a drinking game. But the Power Hour is a forum that provides an opportunity for all of the members of our conferences to discuss the challenges women and other underrepresented minorities continue to face in science. It provides a safe and informal setting in which scenarios and experiences can be discussed and hopefully collective solutions can be identified and implemented. I've had the opportunity to take the Power Hour globally as well, having been invited to provide Power Hours at this list of institutions and universities around the world. And if you are interested in running a Power Hour in your organization, send me an email and I'd be happy to do so. So, to be truly valued and rewarded by nearly all organizations, what I have learned after 30 years is that it really boils down to just 3 things. It is the quality of the work you do. It is the quantity of the work you do. And it is how you treat others while you do that work. And finally, the last lesson is never forget to say thank you. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for your time. And thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for an inspirational presentation. I was screaming like crazy all the lessons that you were sharing with us. I would like to open this to questions from our attendees, our participants. But while they're typing their questions, which I'm going to read to you, would you do something different?
I don't think so. It was a very different time back in the 70s and 80s as a woman in science than it even is now. It doesn't mean that the challenges, and sadly, I think the challenges have not improved to the extent that I had always hoped they would. But like previous speakers who represent underrepresented minorities or different ethnicities. At that time, I was the only woman in an environment of all men. And it was a very great challenge to continue to try to combine my dreams of doing science with also balancing having a family. And I think my goal has always been to continue to pull if the generation of women out there and minorities will continue to push.
Great. Any questions from our participants? I could keep asking questions. So let me ask one more. What advice would you give to your younger self?
I would tell my younger self, all the women and men that I mentor, and my own sons, that to relax just a bit, because you have absolutely no concept of where you are going to end up. And I find that the imposter syndrome and all of the concerns that they have, over time and with experience, they will realize that those worries were for naught, because they will end up on the path that's meant and is right for them.
Yeah, it makes sense. There are a couple of comments on the chat, but let me read you a question that emerged. Working on the Exxon Valdez, what sort of issues did you confront? Were there a lot of women working on the cleanup? I suspect it was harder for you, and I wondered if they were prepared on the women who worked on it.
Yes, there were. Yes, at the time, I worked on a team of about 300 emergency responders, and of those, there may have been 5 women. None of them were in the management tier. And it was a very, very male-dominated environment. I spent most of my time as a chemist explaining biomarker data to law enforcement, to judges and to lawyers, trying to discern what damage Exxon had caused and what was historically impacting the environment.
So what did you tell yourself when you felt discouraged or wanted to quit because of your identity or being the only woman in your spaces? If you did want to quit, and how did you get through that?
Yeah, I really had hoped to succeed in my first professional position by moving into management. The line was very long, and everyone in front of me was a male. And it was a very difficult decision to make. But I determined that if I wanted to get where I had hoped to be, I would have to take an alternative path. And I have returned to Exxon as an invited speaker several times. And they regret in some circumstances that there wasn't opportunity for women during those days. But it was something that I had a passion for, and it was just not in my nature to ever give up.
I like that. You're traveling while having a small family is admirable. Did you have a strong family support system to help you with childcare? What can you suggest to young mothers today in regards to balancing work and family?
I wish I'd had a strong and close family support system. I lived in Houston, Texas, and my parents and my husband's parents both lived in Pennsylvania. We were a 2-career couple. I married a chemist who also had a career and ran his own chemical business. And so we hired a nanny, and I was very, very fortunate to have only 2 nannies in the boys' lives, one when we were in Houston and one when we were working in Washington, D.C. And it is a major challenge to this day for women to support both the family responsibilities that they have as well as their career goals. And my advice is to it takes a village. I was very fortunate in that I had some friends who also had small children. I was fortunate in that if my parents weren't there to take care of the kids when I needed them to, they'd often meet me where I would travel in order to watch the kids while I pursued my career. And then my husband and I made an agreement that neither of us, even though we were both chemists, would be away from the children if we could, help it at any time. So he made sacrifices, as did I. One of the challenging things that's very unexpected is that I very sadly in the last 20 months have lost my husband to an unexpected aneurysm. And so I have a new appreciation for what women who raise children alone must go through, although my sons are fairly grown at this point. I can't imagine the challenges of single parenting. And that's why anytime I can provide support to women currently young women, employees of my own, who have careers and children, my entire hope is to be sympathetic, supportive, and flexible so that they can excel in their careers, but also take responsibilities and be actively engaged in every aspect of their family lives.
Yeah, it's really, work-life balance is a challenge for most of us. And it's great to have a supporting partner along the way. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, yeah. Here's another question. In your opinion, what, if any, are the key differences for women and other URMs? URMs, guys?
Underrepresented minorities.
Underrepresented minorities. There you go. In industry versus academia. Are there any things that the academy can learn from industry in terms of the support of women and URMs in STEM? Now I know acronyms.
Yeah, I think the differences are sadly dramatic between industry and academe. And I work almost entirely with members of my board who are our conferees who are from academic institutions, but there's just a different practice and policy and culture between the two environments. And I always felt more drawn to industry, largely because they do have well-established rules, policies, and practices and enforcement. The academic freedom that you get in universities and sometimes just the structural orientation of universities makes it much more difficult to assure that concerns about equity and inclusion, concerns about harassment, rise to the level of being addressed. But in industry, those are mostly very, very well and clearly defined. There are rules to which employees must abide, and if not, you're gone. Whereas both with tenure and just a individual contributor role that many academic institutions still foster, it is much less uniform in terms of what different academic institutions have in terms of respecting individual rights and creating an environment that is free from discrimination and free from any type of harassment.
Yeah. I think we have more comments? No, we have 15 more minutes. Please, if you have any questions, please ask. Would you ever go to academia, Nancy?
Pardon me?
Would you ever pursue a career in academia? Did you ever think about it?
I was a great disappointment to my graduate advisor because, of course, most graduate advisors and most graduate students are in graduate school because they think an academic career is what they want. And it's a very insulated culture. And it was the only one I had known. I had never worked outside of academe through my, between undergraduate and graduate school. But I was very fortunate because I really wanted the balance that I was seeking with my personal life and my professional life. And I knew from watching faculty members that that was a very hard line to establish if you had an academic career because of the nature of fundamental research and grant writing and all of the demands that are in the environment. And I get into trouble with my own board members and a lot of the university faculty who invite me to come speak because I tell graduate students not to go, not to postdoc, because I think postdocing is forced labor. And I think that there are a lot of alternatives that graduate students can pursue to still get them where they want to go in their careers. And I'm hoping that within my lifetime, the whole concept of the postdoc will perhaps change. So there is a greater value for the contributions made, or even the lack of it, the need for someone who has proven that they can do their independent research and get their degree, but not necessarily have to continue without having the independence and the financial support that I think that they deserve.
Yeah. Can you expand a little bit on that? See, we all come, well, most of us come from academia, and shifting to a business environment, I did that move as well, was not exactly obvious at the very beginning. And, you know, there was, at least when I was in graduate school, there was this kind of sense that you either go to academia or you're a failure, which was actually haunting us and following us. And I've met so many super successful individuals like yourself, for example, who are both happy with the assignment that they have. I never wanted to teach. They don't teach, but their contribution is actually up front and center. It's a good and happy life. So I'm intrigued by your comment about postdocs, because some of us went through all kinds of iterations before we decided what identity we want to actually adopt.
I think now more than ever, there are opportunities for graduate students who get their degrees to go and work in a startup. I sit on the board of a biotechnological pharmaceutical company who are hiring people all the time. And that type of experience is going to give you the flavor, and therefore you're going to be able to make a choice about which path might be much more appropriate for your goals in life and for your personality, your comfort level, and what you want to do. And I don't think graduate students get encouraged to look outside of anything but a postdoc. And I think that they are also kind of held bound that they have to get the postdoc or they'll never succeed. And I disagree with all of that. And so I encourage especially women and underrepresented minorities not to just accept that there's a single path for them in their career, because they're not. It's an opportunity for you to choose. And although I am not an important person in the world, I know all the important people, believe it or not. And my North Star is that I believe I'm a connector. So if there are students out there, graduate students who are trying to decide where to go and what to do, please reach out to me. Tell me what you want, and I'll find somebody who does it for you and put you two together, and hopefully something good will happen.
Yes. So these are the types of connection communities that this type of symposium is making. And I really hope we will meet all together in person in the future.
I do too. And I mentioned that there was going to be a prize, Stella, and you asked the first question. And the whole goal of the lesson about asking questions is it can change your life. And so, Stella, I'm going to offer you to either attend and be my guest or choose a graduate student, a worthy graduate student, to attend any of the 400 Gordon Research Conferences that we offer. And I will pay for their registration, which includes their housing and all their meals. So I want to offer that to you for being such a wonderful host and to show my dedication to helping the next generation of students achieve their goals.
Thank you so much. It's extremely generous. I will make it available to a student. I would love to come to the conference. Don't take me wrong, and I will start looking them up. We will figure out how to do that with our participants. But thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank you.
And I will be reaching out to you because I love this conversation. So thank you so much again for sharing your experience and your expertise and your wisdom and all the lessons learned. Oh wait, hold on. We have one more question then. There you go. Can you speak a little bit more about the Power Hour?
Yes, I would very much like to. So the program was started in 2016, right before the pandemic, and ran a few years. And it was an attempt to address the fact that even after all my years in science, women were still facing the same type of challenges that I had faced earlier in my career. And I brought together a group of women and asked about their what would be an effective way for us to identify the problems and generate solutions. And so we came up with an idea that at every one of our conferences, we'd have dedicated time for people to gather and discuss scenarios that we would develop that dealt with things like what someone needs from a mentor. Because everyone wants a mentor, but often has no idea what a mentor should be doing for them, or how to advocate for yourselves, how to address harassment, or how to be an active bystander and an advocate. And so we initiated these Power Hours, and they were not intended for just the women at our meeting. They were intended for all the participants. And they've been very successful because men and women and the majority of our attendees participate. GRC has worked very hard over the last 19 years to create an environment and an expectation that women in our scientific communities serve as chairs, speakers, and discussion leaders at our meetings in parity with men. And that has been achieved. What has not been achieved is to be able to create that same level of parity or that same level of involvement for underrepresented minorities in our communities. And so that's what the Power Hour continues to focus on. I'm a white woman and can't speak in any appropriate real way about the challenges that underrepresented minorities may also face. But we have women in our communities who can, and who help set a format and a safe environment to bring up topics that are not being covered in graduate departments across universities. And so this is one small way that our organization can hopefully change the culture of science.
Yes, there is a comment there. There are many professional societies that have meetings, the American Astronomical Society, for example, or the American Meteorological Society that I'm leading. I wonder whether you thought of sharing the Power Hour idea with other group societies for their meetings. I'm thinking about it right now. It's a great question,
and I have run Power Hours at 2 American Chemical Society national meetings as a member of the society and a former employee. The CEO of AAAS is on the GRC Board of Trustees. So we have a very good connection and interaction. And as I said, I've been honored to be invited. And it's one of the things I enjoy most is to have the opportunity to go and meet graduate students and companies and institutions, and to run a Power Hour to determine the depth of our challenge or the successes that are being made around the world. So I am more than interested and happy and willing, time permitting in my schedule, to just invite me. This is a service that I provide because of my personal commitment, and that GRC provides to try to change science. So no cost to you, just have to get it on yours and my schedules.
Sounds good. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. We are going to transition to a short break, just to stretch your legs. We will come back at 3:15. And we'll help you move forward in the challenges that you're encountering. So first, we'll start with introductions. I asked our panelists to take 5 minutes to talk a little bit about themselves, and then we can actually move forward with the Q&A. So let's start with Chiara. Chiara, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, thank you. Do you speak
Thank
Italian?
you.
Very good.
I do not, but I speak Greek.
Ah, okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this panel. So I'm Chiara Mingarelli. I'm currently an assistant professor at the University of Connecticut. I have a joint appointment at the Simons Foundation, one of the sponsors, I believe, for this meeting. And I'm in the Center for Computational Astrophysics there. So I'm an associate research scientist. My path has been somewhat nonlinear and untraditional. I did my undergraduate degree in math and physics in Canada, in Ottawa, at Carleton University. And then I went to Italy for graduate school. So I'm half Italian, half Canadian, and I did a master's degree at the University of Bologna in northern Italy. After that, I did a PhD in the UK at the University of Birmingham. At the time, that was the only place where you could do gravitational waves research, and I've been fascinated by black holes since I was a kid. So I very much wanted to stay on the path of studying black holes. And so this was before, of course, it was cool to do gravitational waves research. So I got my PhD there. I was very fortunate and also well prepared, which seems to be the key thing, to win a Marie Curie fellowship, which I took to the best place that would take me. So I went to Caltech in Pasadena in California with my Marie Curie. I was there for 2 years. And then the third year, I had to go back to Europe. I was at the Max Planck Institute. And from there, I came to the Simons Foundation and the University of Connecticut. So I currently have a large research group. I have 4 PhD students. I have 2 undergraduates and a postdoc. Everyone is doing amazing work on different aspects of black holes. And I have a very diverse group as well. So I have both men and women. They are participants of different marginalized groups along different axes. We, talk a lot about things that affect us in different ways at group meetings, not only science, but we try to just talk about things that are happening in our lives and, be human beings with each other. Yeah, so my own research is about supermassive black hole mergers and how these supermassive black holes that are about 1 billion times the mass of the sun can merge in galaxy mergers, because every galaxy has a supermassive black hole at the center, and how we can detect these gravitational waves, which are ripples in the fabric of space-time, from supermassive black hole mergers.
Awesome, thank you. Let's continue with Dion.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dion Hopkins Brown. I'm a research fishery biologist for the National Marine Fisheries Service out of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And I've been in this position for 22 years now. It's unique in that it is part of a cooperative program with Savannah State University. So I am a NOAA scientist, fishery scientist that is stationed at an HBCU located in Savannah, Georgia. My research is primarily on marine invertebrate species and fisheries habitat. I have 3 master's students and an undergraduate that are looking at different topics around oyster reef habitat and restoring habitat and monitoring oyster reefs for when they begin to take on the functionality of natural reefs. And I guess I'll mention I'll be looking for a postdoc soon, so I'll put that out there for anyone who's listening. My path to marine science was very, very straight. I was always interested in the marine environment. I majored in marine biology here at Savannah State College at the time, and went to graduate school at the University of South Carolina, where I studied the very, very important and popular burrowing brittle star in my entree into marine ecology. And during that time, I was a cooperative education student with the National Marine Fisheries Service and found my way into NOAA via that pathway.
Cool, thank you, Dion. How about Tara?
Sure. Yes, my name is Tara Span. I currently am the Chief People and Strategy Officer at Mentor, and I'm based out of Boston, Massachusetts. So you're probably wondering, why is there a Chief People and Strategy Officer here on this call? So my background is in engineering, electrical engineering, and I also have a law degree. I've had careers in both of those areas. I started out as an electrical engineer, moved into senior engineering positions. I've worked for the Department of Defense. Department of the Navy, had my own fleet of ships working primarily for communications and weapon systems, and responsible for communications and weapon systems on those particular fleet. I also, while I was working as an electrical engineer, I also went to law school, and from there was doing some work in intellectual property law in California. And then I don't know, my trajectory is like off the charts. I ended up here in Chief People and Strategy Officer role, but in between, I did a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work, both supply chain, diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as on the human resource or human capital side as well. So yeah, so I've been here at Mentor for about 2 years.
Wonderful, thank you. And Amanda.
Hello, my name is Amanda Howe, and I am a technology, engineering, and robotics teacher here at Mashpee Middle High School in Massachusetts on Cape Cod. I feel a little out of my league, I will admit. Listening to all of you, you do amazing things. I've been a teacher for 18 years. It was not the career I chose. I actually have a degree in marine biology, a bachelor's degree in marine biology, and thought I would end up kind of sitting in your shoes, Dion. And then life took a turn. I did biotech for almost 10 years, research and development, worked in Cambridge, worked on the Cape, worked at Woods Hole a little bit. And then I said, I really think I want to help kids find out how they can make the world better. And so I decided to become a middle school general science teacher, background being in marine biology. Instead, I got a position as a technology education teacher at Plymouth South Middle School, where I spent 10 years. Never had picked up a tool, never understood the engineering design process, do not have an engineering background, really learned on the job from an amazing colleague who just said, it's really about problem solving. And so in 2019, I was fortunate enough to be awarded the Massachusetts STEM Teacher of the Year by Raytheon and the Massachusetts Department of Ed and the Kraft family at Gillette Stadium. I think the work that got me there was that I'm really out of the box. I don't really do anything traditional in my classroom. I am proud to say that I have been the robotics coach here at Mashpee Middle High School for the last 7 years. My teams went to Worlds in Texas last year, and they were only 2 teams of 800 from across the world that competed. I don't take responsibility for the robots that they build or code. I'm just the person behind it, I guess, who tries to motivate them, but they don't need much motivation. I think the biggest accomplishment in my life that I've had is that I'm a mother of 4 and I still work full time and I enjoy my career. I think of my students as my kids, just like my 4 kids at home. And I try to really enjoy life every day, passionate about the education that I teach, but I'm trying this year to take a breath and step back and take some time for my family.
Wonderful, thank you, Amanda. Thank you all for the wonderful introduction. So let's start with challenges. what are the challenges that are associated with recruiting women or girls into STEM careers? And I would start with Dion this time.
Sure. So, I thought this question was interesting because a lot of the students that I interact with are the ones that many years ago watched The Little Mermaid or Nemo, or fell in love with turtles, or fell in love with marine biology in some form or another. So the challenge is not so much recruitment for me in this space. My challenge is more retention. And the first plenary speaker talked about the nature of the hostile environment that can be STEM for women and girls. And so, they often come in, but the challenge is not so much getting them in, even for very young scholars. I run a marine science camp here. It's for young people 7 years old to 18. And then of course we have the bachelor's program in marine science and the master's program. So we get them in at all interest levels, but whether it is the level of preparation that they're coming into, that they're coming with when they go into their core classes, or whether it's the nature of the environment that makes them feel like that they don't belong, or maybe an experience that they have as they're pursuing their career. And it usually, the challenges that I see hit women usually happens in that thesis defense process or that thesis writing process, and they start to get convinced that maybe this is not the place for them because of the way that they are experiencing it. So I have to say that it's not recruitment for me as much as it is development and retention.
Thank you. Sarah?
I totally agree with you. As I was thinking about this question, that's exactly what came to mind. However, I'm like, okay, if I had to answer this question, based on how it's written, how would I answer that? And really, I'm thinking there's just a lack of things, like a lack of effective and expansive outreach for those who are recruiting. Lack of access and awareness for young women to take advantage of such opportunities. There's so many opportunities that young women are just not aware of, especially young women of color. There's lack of representation. So seeing someone who looks like them in these particular careers that might eventually be of interest. There's lack of mentoring. Most importantly, there's lack of sponsorship. There's lack of enriching networks that are consistent from kindergarten to career, right? Because there's so many gaps, as you were stating. There's so many gaps in terms of recruitment or interest in the kindergarten to middle school, then getting them from middle school to all the way to college and careers. There's so many gaps there, and there aren't consistent enriching networks throughout the process, as well as just another lack, I'd say, is lack of trust in the system. So those are the things that I would name.
Thank you, Tara. Amanda?
Tara, it's interesting when you say gaps, and I think that is so true in education, because I think if our substantially our populations, our minority populations, or our females were given opportunities at younger grades and they experienced robotics. For us, we always had a high school program. We never had a middle school program, 5th or 6th grade. And a couple of years ago, I reached down and said, we need to have a 5th and 6th grade robotics team because I need a feeder program for my high school robotics team, because the social pressures of joining then is a little bit easier. It's okay, they feel a little more comfortable. But when they're in high school, it seems like if they join robotics in a way, they're so different. They don't want to walk into the room. They feel their confidence isn't as strong, and they're more aware of, I think, being different. But when they're younger, it's just, I want to build a robot. So my whole goal here in Mashpee is to actually build, like you said, a K-12 robotics program that's vertically aligned, so that there won't be those gaps, so that they remember they did it in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and it just became a part of them. I think that's the biggest thing, is that we don't make it a part of our girls at a young age. And so why, it's scary. There's fear to take that leap when you're older, but you don't have that fear when you're younger. And so if we can really foster that at a younger age, then I think that more students will go into it.
Very good point. kids are the natural explorers, right? Especially when they're babies. I'm going to wait for the interpreter to return, and we're going to go with Chiara. Here we are. Chiara.
Yeah, I think that Dion, Tara, and Amanda have all made very good points. I think that, Tara and Dion both touched on retention. Sometimes we talk about a leaky pipeline in STEM fields, but there is no pipeline. We expect women and girls to be to maintain their interests in science, and we nurture it when they're young, and then in these very formative teenage years, like what Amanda was saying, young women are very afraid of showing that they're smart. It's not socially acceptable to be a smart young woman. I remember when I was in high school, I was so frustrated with some of my friends that I knew were smart, but were pretending to be stupid and doing badly on tests on purpose because that was the cool thing to do. And it boggled my mind. So it's like we nurture students at a certain stage, and then we stop and throw them to the wolves. And then back in university, we expect there to be lots of women taking hard sciences, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense if you think about a holistic approach. So yeah, as Amanda was saying, I think that the social pressure is so hard. And in fact, I read a study recently that showed that a lot of women who are in professional physics and math careers had a parent who was an academic and was really the guiding force behind them getting to that level. My father is a mathematician, so I'm certainly privileged along many different axes in that sense. And I remember in high school when my career could have taken a total different turn. When I was in grade 10 math, I had a teacher who was horrible to me, and she made me feel like I was so stupid. And I asked my father the same questions about math, and then he was like, no, you're brilliant. But who doesn't? Not everyone has a math professor at home that'll tell you that your questions are intuitive and brilliant and not really stupid. So I think it's just so hard. And my own students, to answer your question, Stella, I think the number one thing that no one has mentioned yet directly is imposter syndrome. A lot of my students really suffer from imposter syndrome, and I've seen a lot of students who suffer from this go into more support roles instead of going into academic roles, like instead of becoming professors or pursuing those kinds of professional careers, they go into outreach. And they do, and it's no wonder, because in my experience, all of these young women are very much rewarded for their outreach skills, for their communication skills. It makes them feel great, like they're being useful and important and having an impact. Whereas when you continue on along postdoc careers and into being a professor, it's just an exercise in deflecting negative comments all the time. So imposter syndrome is, I think, the one thing that I wanted to highlight, and that's a real struggle.
We are our own worst enemies, right? Sometimes. Thank you, Chiara. So we're gonna, along those lines, when it comes to enemies, there's lots of conversation about unconscious biases in our environments and how difficult it is to recognize or remove them. For you, what are your strategies for building systems that work in spite of bias? Or some ways you protect your process and make sure that bias is not playing a role when you're addressing others, when interacting with others, for you and for others as well. Does this make sense? Unconscious biases is something that is very ingrained in us, right? So what are your strategies to deal with it? And I would like to start this time with Tara.
Sure. So I agree that there are biases, right? But I want to highlight that not all of them are unconscious. There's a lot of conscious biases happening, especially in STEM and careers that are STEM oriented. But until there's acceptance of this reality and it is explicitly acknowledged, the systemic inequities will continue to erode our innovation, especially for women. The way to change the systems is really to change policies and practices. policies that are inherently biased and inequitable create systems of inequitable practices. I would say if I'm looking at like elements of a strategy, I might recommend one, acknowledgement. Secondly, accountability, and accountability from boards to CEOs to individual contributors. We always talk about, it starts at the top, and there is a lot of truth to that, but in order for things to be implemented throughout organizations and for it to become a regular practice, there's that frozen middle that must also have accountability. And education and awareness. So really understanding history and how it has contributed to the inequities in the beginning is the only way we're going to get through some of these biases. Strategy building, strategy execution, and strategy execution management are three things that I would definitely say organizations, and corporations, and academia need. And also adopting values of equity and inclusion to maintain any realm of sustainability would be important. So if I had to put this through my strategic lens, those are the things in the different phases that I'd be looking at to ensure that bias is, lessened, or that we're aware of it so that we know how to correct it for the future.
Thank you. Amanda?
So this is the bias is something we see in robotics with my team all the time. And I don't feel like I feel like in our school, in our team, the biases are not like apparent. I'm sure there are some kids probably feel biases, but I feel like we're accepting of all the differences. I'm really proud that we have girls on our team and we have minority students. Even some of our English language learners are our most successful students in our robotics program. What I find is that when we go out into other competitions, that's where the biases are. And I don't have an answer to stop it other than to call out when it happens. Like, I'm so proud of my girls when they're really strong, when they do really great in a tournament. And it feels like they have to achieve 2 times harder than everybody else, all the boys that are competing on that robotics competition day. So much so that like it comes down to partnering. I just want to tell you a little something that happens. They have to partner with other teams to move on to the finals. And they have to go and ask these teams, will you partner with me and work with me in the finals? And teams have turned them down to their face and said, we're not here to win. Like, we don't plan on partnering with you. When they were the best team of the day, they had the best statistics. And later on, they went back up. The same team said to them, oh, you know what? I'm sorry. We actually will partner with you because you are as good as we are. But they don't believe it. And that drives me crazy. Like, how do you not believe that those girls are just as good as the boys that are on that robotics field? So I see the biases, but I would ask for help from all of you, because I don't know what to say to my high school girls other than it is so unfair and it's so wrong that you get treated that way. And it's just, they work harder. It does make my girls work harder, but they shouldn't have to. And I don't know, like, I think in high school, we don't do a good enough job of really talking about the biases in high school in classrooms and teaching the students in the classrooms their feelings and why they feel the way they do and how they're treating others. We kind of tiptoe around it, unfortunately, in high school.
Yeah. Dion?
Yeah, I'm hearing this pattern of overwork that I see in my agency, and the numbers of women at different levels, supervisory, non-supervisory, contract, full-time employees at least in my region of the National Marine Fisheries Service is highly representative. But what I see in how people work is that as an agency, we kind of have a culture of overwork anyway. It's unfortunate, but it's there. But what I see in the women that are highly regarded as equals is that they establish a pattern of really extreme overwork. And then once they did that, like Amanda said, oh yeah, you are as good as we, and you're capable. And maybe those women will come back down to a level of less overwork, but it's like kind of expected to demonstrate your capacity to do this job. in terms of, I was thinking in terms of how I've seen bias addressed, or how to try and deal with the nature of bias that I see and how we bring in new talent. There are relationships between fisheries and different academic institutions, and the bias that Tara referred to, that just that straight is not, it's not implicit, it's not accidental, it is true manifestation of a bias, is that, really challenging how we make decisions and how we conduct business that has bias baked into it. For example, how do we choose what students we work with? How do we bring in different co-op students? Are we just reaching to the same organizations over and over again out of laziness? Or are we demonstrating that we believe that students from those organizations, those institutions, are inherently better than others? And when we see people doing that, particularly with me being a federal employee based at an HBCU, I ask, okay, well, why do we go to this school versus another school for the opportunities that are there when you're looking for particular talents that are available, in other places? And just one strategy that I never really agreed with, but I now, 20 years later, understand why a colleague did it. When I first started working with another colleague here, she always authored her papers with just her initials. And it was a simple gesture. And I just had so much bravado, like, I'm not doing that. My name is Dion, and I want Dion on my paper. My mama named me Dion, and I want people to see Dion on this paper. But I understand, now I'm 20 years in, I understand what she was trying to achieve, and she still hit some stumbling blocks. It's unfortunate that someone would need to do something, but that was a process that she developed for herself. And I understand it, and unfortunately, I see it as still being a valuable strategy for some women.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I did as well. Chiara.
All of my papers are CMF Mingarelli. Absolutely. And I wonder where I learned that strategy. I think it's because I saw my dad's papers were AB Mingarelli, so I just assumed that that's what everyone did. But maybe that's also my unconscious bias of me taking my own name more seriously by only seeing my initials. I don't know. I don't know if there's an answer to unconscious bias. One thing that I really worry about is that all of the women that are succeeding in our systems right now are exceptional, and they are because they have to be. And is it healthy for young women to be seeing, their idea of a scientist are these groundbreaking, like 5 Sigma geniuses that end up thriving despite everything that we throw against them? Like, where's the middle ground? Where is just the average woman scientist? Where is she? I see so many average men every single day of my life, and they're everywhere. And I see them give talks, and I think, how are you here? Like, how is this happening? How are you giving a talk here? And I think, like, if you were a woman, there's no way you would have survived. So I want to know where all of the average women are. And I wonder if that would go a long way. Like, if we think about the distribution of excellence in women, like right now we're like these delta functions in the middle to survive. You have to be amazing to stay here. And that's the only vision that women have. So I wonder if it's discouraging if women see only like top level excellence and they think, I'm not that good, I can't make it, so I'm not going to try. I don't know, but it's I think that it's really tough the way that things are set out right now. So let's see, there was another part of this. How do I handle unconscious bias? So it's obviously, if it's unconscious, which as Tara was saying, sometimes it's not. I have had men say to me that they genuinely believe that women don't belong in physics. If it's unconscious, then, when I'm reading applications, for example, I'll try to read all of the applications and then go back to the ones that I ranked very lowly and try to like read them again and see, like, have I done anything in a kind of systematic way? If there was, you know, a non-white name, like, are those all at the bottom of my pile? And then I'll think like, you know, what happened? And then I'll read them again. And then I'll try to like put a different name in my head and read it again, or like change the voice in my head that I hear when I read the application. Those are small things that I do, but I think the number one thing right now is to just remember that I have an unconscious bias and that that's there, and to just try to keep that in mind. And I think that for me, that's the realest, most useful tactic that I have.
Thank you. We're going to transition to questions on the chat. And by the way, every time I give a talk in a women's or girls' group, and I tell them that, listen, if you think I'm the smartest person you've ever met, you need to go out more. I work hard. That's what happens here. And you can be anything you want. So that's a very good point. So going to the chat, thinking about who does STEM well, what are your feelings about women's colleges? Do you think it may be more isolating or more empowering for women, especially in STEM fields? And actually the same question for women's college and HBCUs. And I would like to start actually with Chiara this time.
My feeling for them is overall positive, and that comes from my experience when I was a PhD student doing outreach. The Institute of Physics gave me a small grant to go and try to engage more women in science. So of course I went to all girls schools that were nearby, and I quickly discovered that they did not need any help. They were fine. All of those women were absolutely fine. They are privileged. They are working hard. They have natural leaders. They are taking math at a regular rate. They're taking physics at a regular rate. There's none of the underrepresentation that you see in mixed classes. So I think that, you know, extending that to the college level, I haven't seen any studies on that, but I can't see how it would hurt, honestly. So I overall would have a positive feeling about that.
Amanda?
I have nothing against them personally, but I would like to just give you a little slant that my high school students say about it. Whenever there's an opportunity to do an all-girls STEM event, my girls that excel the best in STEM say, we don't want that, Mrs. Howe. We want to be with everybody and prove how good we are. Like, we want to be held to the same level and the same achievement. So it's funny, like, I have girls that are very successful in robotics. They're applying to MIT, not applying to one all-female college, and they're looking to be engineers. They really just want to be in equal, want to be looked at as equal. And I can really understand that. Not to say that if you go to an all-female college, you're not considered equal, but they want to be on the same level playing field, and they want to prove that they can do it alongside anybody in anyone. So that's just my take from a high school perspective.
Tara?
Yeah, I love this question. I've been sitting here thinking about it since it popped up. I've never attended an all-girls college, never even thought about it. In the one sense, I'd say that if I had to think about it on a scale of, you know, empowering to not, I would say it's definitely more empowering. However, at the same time, you know, are these programs really preparing women for the real world, right? You can live in a bubble of the energy of women, which is extremely impactful, and you know, any man who walks into a room of women, they could probably tell you about the shift in the energy, right? That's powerful. But then when they step out into the real world, that's what they're up against. You know, they're up against the inequalities and the inequities and the systemic inequities that we are living in. So if these particular programs are indeed preparing them for that and giving them real life experience in that and how to overcome those things, I think great. I think there's another thing that is great about being in an all women's institution is building a strong network and having more visibility to someone who looks like you in these very, you know, advanced fields of science and technology. So, you know, I'd say there's definitely some upside so long as, again, it's preparing us for, the systemic issues that are happening external to that particular world.
Yeah, thank you. Kiara?
I think I already spoke on this.
Sorry. My windows shifted suddenly and I kind of lost my
I of course have more to say, but it's not my turn.
I'm trying to go around and now it's zigzagging. Dion.
I think thank you. Yeah, I'm really enjoying the answers to these questions, and my perspective comes from having attended an HBCU, and I'm in a predominantly woman department. There's 9 faculty in this department, and only 2 are men, and only one of the men is tenure track. So we are strongly a woman environment. When I was attending Savannah State, about every 15 years or so, there's a rumor that Savannah State University is going to get absorbed into the larger state university that's a majority university nearby. And this is relevant to the woman experience, I assure you. When I was in school, this rumor started flowing around and people were talking about, why do you need HBCUs? Do we still need them? Are they still relevant? Blah, blah, blah. And the conversation I had with my friends at that time, my best friend was a chemistry major. She's absolutely brilliant. Some of the best ideas I've ever heard have come from her. And she posited that, when you're in an environment like a women's college, or when you're in an environment like an HBCU, you may not become student government president, you may not become a cheerleader, you may not make the basketball team or do any of these things, but it's not going to be because you're a woman. It'll be something else. It's not going to be because you're a person of color. It'll be something else. And that's one of the few places in the world that that's going to occur. And it gives you the opportunity to fully develop into your authentic self with that isolating factor removed. And we understand that the world is such that those factors are going to be reincorporated. But there's a small time in your life where it may be because you're rich or poor, short or tall, fat or skinny, but it's not going to be that you didn't get that opportunity because you were a woman. It's going to be something else. And that's a chance to grow and develop in a way that can be very unique and very helpful for some people. The disadvantage of it is that you don't always get the investment at your institution to create the learning experience that you need because you're going to this specially kind of institution. Because I was going to a very small HBCU, when I went to internships in the summer as a collegiate, I went to bigger, broader places that had much more investment. I went to Purdue University, and they had computer labs there that we didn't see at Savannah State until 3 years after I had graduated. But because I had gone to that larger institution and there was that state investment, there was that industry investment, those students had levels of preparation that I wouldn't have had I not been exposed there. So I think one of the disadvantages about being in these bubbles is sometimes we get terrific magnification of something that we really need in terms of our intellectual authenticity. Sometimes we pay a fee when it comes to something else. And that's why, the choice to attend such an institution really, has, it's important on an individual basis. When I come up with a bad idea here with these other 7 women, it's just a bad idea. It's not, I don't get talked over because I'm a woman. I get talked over because I put out a bad idea. And that's really, really valuable.
Yeah. So let's go with the second question. How do we deal with the systemic bullying and harassment towards women in academia with the tenure system? And I will start with Dion this time.
That is really challenging. And we see it here even at a small school, and even me being a federal employee who doesn't have to participate in that system. Recognizing in the tenure process the different activities, that faculty participate in that contribute to their overall development and to the environment of the school is important. I think many, well, I know some universities have included other types of scholarly service in addition to, publications, serving on committees, town to gown types of approaches. But I really don't think we're doing a really, really good job. I mean, as an academic community, I mean, I do see the younger women faculty balancing having twins, having 3 graduate students, teach 4 classes, and try to get some publications out to meet their tenure requirement. It's real, and I don't think that it's really been mitigated in a significant way. I think that there have been efforts made to do that, but more often I see success just related to that pattern of overwork that we've talked about already. I wish I had something more optimistic.
Writing grants, right? And then world peace on the side. It feels
Yes.
like that sometimes. Kiara?
Yeah, as a woman in the tenure system right now, I would love to know what the answer is. I don't know. I've been in faculty meetings where I've had, tenured full professors shout, like actually shout at young, female tenure track professors, and no one seems to mind. I objected in that particular meeting, asking if I felt like that was a reasonable way to speak to a colleague and if they felt like their point was now well made. And I certainly couldn't remember what the point was because now I'm just too nervous about asking a question. And that seemed to make people think about it. But I think I was so angry that like there was like a no filter moment. And I'm not sure how safe that was, but anyhow, it's what happened. But I'm not really sure how to deal with the harassment or the bullying other than, saying that allies are important. Try to find a mentor who cares about you, who's in a, more senior, more powerful position, and make sure they have your back. I don't think it's necessarily a solution forever, but it's certainly a practical thing that I think that we can do right now.
Tara?
Yeah, I'm not in academia, but I did date one. I can tell you that, what I can tell you is that, if you see the systemic bullying for women, that it's multiplied many times over for Black women. I can assure you of that just from some of the things I've witnessed and seen. But I think Chiara probably said it best in terms of having allies. I think we need men, especially white men, in the room to speak up and truly be allies and sponsors for women. I think in those particular settings, that is probably one of the only ways that you're going to break any systems that are inequitable. So that would be my guess.
Amanda?
I've never been in academia either, so I can't say. I can add this though. My greatest joy is being a teacher and a mom of 4. But I think the one thing I hate sometimes is when people will say, she's STEM teacher of the year, she's a robotics teacher, and she's a mom of 4. Like, nobody says that about a guy, right? Like a guy, like he's not STEM teacher of the year and robotics, and he's a dad of 3. Like, why? It's an accomplishment, yes, but like, give me credit for where credit's due. And I think that that's what all of you should get in the room in academics, like give you credit for the hard work that you've done. That always though strikes me when people say that. It's like I'm Wonder Woman. I'm not Wonder Woman. I'm just a person doing my job and trying to be a good mom too. So that was just my kind of 2 cents on that.
Yeah. So how do we nurture and promote women's or girls' success in STEM? We all recognize we need more. We all recognize we need diversity. How do we do that? Tara, let's start with you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't really hear the question.
How do we nurture and promote women's or girls' success in STEM?
Yeah.
Let's move to action.
Yeah, got it. So again, this is probably a question I'm tempted to defer to others on this, but I'm only really able to provide maybe experience and some observations. But if I were to offer my experience, corporate and academia are difficult sectors for retention of women in STEM, again, based on bureaucratic systems of inequity. Some of the collegiate programs I found useful, I think, for a sense of belonging and resources were the National Society of Black Engineers, or NSBE, and the Society of Women Engineers, SWE. And even with SWE, though, again, I have to speak to this because I am a Black woman, but it was limited for my personal success due to the intersectionality of my many identities. But as I may have mentioned before, these organizations may have been beneficial in retention during college. They were not as successful in closing the gap of retention for the longevity of my personal STEM or engineering career, right? So I think programs that create cultures where sponsors, and I talked about that a little bit, and sponsorship play an influential role in helping women navigate through corporate, academia, and organizational bureaucracy would be more successful at retaining women and girls in STEM.
Dion?
I have a couple of ideas about this. First, I think about when you fly on a plane, put your own oxygen mask on and then help others. We've got to address mental health, and we have to promote it, head on. Some of the challenges that I've seen with student success has been because some women have been struggling, some senior or junior professionals have been struggling, and are not creating the mentoring relationships that they need to be able to help their students be successful, because they are dealing with some of the pressures, and they have some unresolved challenges with some of the pressures that we face, and it finds its way, onto the student. So first, I say we need to manage our own health, manage our own well-being, and make sure we're bringing our best professional self to that junior professional that we're working with, whatever their age is. The other thing is to be present in all of the different venues. Be present in the classroom, like you all have said, seeing someone that looks like you doing something that you aspire to do, being in the classroom, being at professional meetings, being on nonprofit boards, showing that there are all of these other parts to an identity in a STEM profession. And talk about entrepreneurship. Everybody doesn't want to be an academic. Everybody doesn't want to be a government employee. Talk about all of those possibilities so that young women can see themselves in that and can customize what they want their STEM identity to be. The other thing is that there are professional organizations, as Tara said. One of the ones that was most valuable to me, it's now called the Association for the Study of Limnology and Oceanography, and it had a multicultural program. It's called ASLOMP. And I first attended that meeting and joined that program as a freshman in 1988. And the other interns and undergrads and graduate students that were attending that meeting way back then, I'm now collaborating with some on grants. Some of us are very good friends. We've been mentors in that program, but that was a network for me when I needed to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, what the heck? I had a network that I could call and say, this looks like foolishness. How do I get around it? And they're like, yeah, that is foolishness. Let's work our way around it. So having that network was really important for me in graduate school when I was the only one. It was really important for me when I, started this position, and it's continued to be a sense of support. Other organizations have that are just centered around the network have grown up. There's BWEEMS, Black Women in Evo, and Marine Science. And what I really like about that group is, you're either marine science, ecology, or evolutionary science, but it's multi-generational. So there are folks who are senior in their career, looking at retirement, and they're brand new professionals, and they're all building that network. The same thing with Black and Marine Science, building that network where you can talk to folks about what you're facing and be in contact with individuals who have already dealt with that, whether they dealt with imposter syndrome or whether they're dealing with their tenure package. Having that community, I think, is important for the success of other women and younger women, because you come into my office, but I don't have all the answers in here. But there is a community that can provide support. And I think that's been most important for me and for the students that I've seen be successful, is being able to tap into your tribe and then run with your tribe as you pursue your career.
Thank you. Kiara.
Yeah, I love what Dion said about putting your own oxygen mask on first. I've never thought about it that way. I've always been slightly nervous about promoting myself too much or talking too much about my own accomplishments because I'm worried people will think I'm big-headed or something like this. But I really like the perspective of, you need to survive to stay there, to be a role model for other people. So put on your own oxygen mask. I love that. My own strategy right now for trying to retain women is to give them the tools that they need to be competitive. So I nominate them for prizes regularly. I try to make sure that they write interesting papers. I try to give them my best ideas, and I make sure that they're the first authors. So they need to have the currency that everyone, buys into. And in that sense, it's making sure that they don't do too much outreach, or else unfortunately people won't take them as seriously, to make sure that their publications go into the best possible journals that they can go into, looking at the author order. And then also, more subtle, insidious things like the author order in terms of where the most senior man is on the list. Because if the most senior man is the second or third author, then people are going to assume it was his idea and not hers. And then the whole point of her being first author now becomes purely ornamental, and no one will believe it's her paper anyway. So these kinds of things, and choosing the right collaborators, it's all a bit of a dark art. But I think it's important to, try to make sure that these young women get credibility along multiple different axes, whether that's prizes, that's emailing my colleagues and saying, I've got a great student who would love to give a talk, and then they can write that they have invited talks on their CV, going to meetings, giving presentations, just making sure that they get out there is, I think, really important and beneficial for their careers.
Thank you. Amanda.
I think just like what Dion said, finding your people that you can go to help nurture and help support you when you are not accepted because you're a woman in STEM. I think that really is something that you need. And I would defer to the rest of the conversations on that.
Thank you. So it's we talk about all the challenges that we have right now. The good news is that we have made progress. So what changes have you seen over the span of your career, and how do you see those evolving in the future? Changes when it comes to women in science in general, or even attitudes towards women in science. And I would like to start with Kiara this time.
Ooh, this is hard. Let's see. I think that when I was starting out, it was unthinkable to have a center like the one that I work in right now that has 50-50 representation for their postdocs. So right now at the Center for Computational Astrophysics at the Simons Foundation, it's only prized postdocs that are the postdocs there. And it really is, something maybe like 45-55, but it's almost at parity. And that's not an accident. That's the result of the former director, David Spergel, making that a decision of that's how it was going to be. And now it's normalized. And now it doesn't feel strange to walk into a place and have an equal chance of seeing a man or a woman. And of course, we can do better with representing other genders. But I think that in terms of the zeroth order thing, that's okay. Of course, there's different ways to improve, but that is a place that I thought was unthinkable when I started. So I'm glad that that exists. And then, there's of course more we can do.
Just got another Rion. All right, Dion.
I think that one of the things that I didn't see 20, 30 years ago that I see now is women being president of really significant professional societies. You didn't see that before. The current president of the American Fisheries Society is a woman of color. ASLO has had women presidents, and so I think that's significant. I think within the community of faculty and scientists that I know, I'm starting to see the death of the woman faculty member as the nurturer. Like, okay, well, if you have a student that needs a little more development, she's going to go with that particular faculty member. I'm really happy to see the death of the mother professor, or even the idea of it, that there's less rigor. And I think Chiara has kind of addressed this in another way. But the rigor is there, and there's that gender identity just doesn't exist in the circles that I'm moving in, and I'm very, very thankful for that.
Yeah, and to add to that, I am leading a 100-year organization and the 5th executive director, and I'm the first woman in this particular position. So things are changing. If not anything else, we can see some change there. Amanda.
Unfortunately for me, as an engineering teacher in a high school, as a female robotics coach, I am only one of 2 in Massachusetts in high school. So I have not seen the changes that you guys have seen yet. When I go to a professional conference for technology and engineering teachers, I am one of the only females at the table. So much so that I joined the board for the Massachusetts Technology and Engineering Collaborative and then became the president. And I was fortunate to have a great board, but I was the only female on the board. And the men on the table were very supportive, but we haven't seen the changes. And I think that's part of the reason why we don't see the changes in our students in the classroom taking engineering classes and robotics classes, because they don't see themselves in the front of the room helping them to learn and pursue those ideas. So unfortunately, I haven't seen the success that you guys have seen on other levels.
Tara.
Yeah, in true engineering fashion, I did some research on this because I could not really speak to whether or not my eyes would be deceiving me or not. But I did look this up a little bit. And let me put in the chat, there is some US Census data that I'll share here that says, yes, there is some improvement. But again, I don't believe everything I read either. So I went to my director of research and evaluation here at Mentor. His name is Mike Geringer, about this. And he had some interesting facts that he highlighted, that there has really been a major shift in the last 25 years in which it's increasingly common to see female scientists, and that the demographics within most STEM careers are shifting. And he said dramatically. I'm not so sure that would be my word. Girls and young women have been outperforming men academically for several decades now. And in many fields, the ratio of women to men is quite high. So his belief is that it's catching up a little bit. And one other thing he noticed is that there are hints in the mentoring literature, and I'm going to share that with you as well. We have a supplement, a STEM supplement to our resource that we have here at Mentor, Elements of Effective Practice. So I'm going to share that for you as well. And he said that there's hints in the mentoring literature that for girls and young women, middle school through undergrad, there is a need for belonging, identity, and overcoming reservations, right? And we talked about that just a little bit, but after undergrad, intentions to stay in STEM, in a STEM field, are often driven by practical things such as pay, advancement, support from peers, skill set alignment, things like that. He said women at the slightly later stages have reported wanting mentors who could open doors, again, hinting to the sponsorship that I talked about, and provide access to opportunities or build advanced skills, even as much as they needed the emotional support to persist. So having that female role model mattered less than these other things. One other thing he said is that he mentions that young women from middle school to high school to undergrad really need as many STEM women role models as possible to sustain the movement. So that's my research.
Takes a village, right? It does. So we have 15 more minutes left. Some final wisdom from you, final thoughts, and then we are going to take the conversation to our salons. So Tara, may I start with you this time?
Starting with me on final thoughts. Yeah, I think we touched upon so many things here. I think they're all true. The truth of the matter is that, women are still not treated fairly. Young women are still not treated fairly. And that we need to do more to create, and we talked about this a little bit, the identity, like STEM being an identity for women, not just something that, they're seeing other people do, but it's a part of, hey, and we have to start at kindergarten. I mean, that's when they're fearless, right? They're fearless at that time. They don't see what we've been taught and what we've experienced as older women. All they know is, I see a football, I want to throw it, I want to play, and that's when we begin to instill these values and things in them to say, yes, absolutely, you should, you could, you don't have to wear pink, you can wear blue. I just think that there are things that we can do to continue to instill that in them until it becomes an identity for them. And women are powerful. So, I think it will definitely move the needle forward for us.
Thank you. Amanda, let's change the world.
Just as what Tara said, is just supporting our youth to encourage them to continue to push the bar and to celebrate their successes. And when they work harder, celebrate it, but also be empathetic and sympathize with them about the working harder, and let them know that hopefully that's not always going to be the case, that they don't always have to work harder to achieve success. Because I really think that that's so important, that they should be able to achieve at the same level.
Kiara?
So many good points have already been made by Tara and by Amanda. I agree with everything that they said. I think that, some of the points that I want to underscore, what Dion said, put your own oxygen mask on first. This is the message that I've taken away for myself from this panel, is to not be afraid to take care of myself first so that I can be around to take care of other people. I also just want to highlight that calling out injustice is okay. If you see something that's not okay, say something. And I think the way that you say it depends on the situation and on the context. And, maybe calling out someone in front of a room of people is not going to get you the result that you want. I'm sure you all know how to do this in your own way, but I think that it is important to say, if you think that something isn't fair. I have done this with my own students before. Like if we've been on a Zoom call with some collaborators and someone said something wildly inappropriate, after they leave, we'll talk about it right away so that they don't go away feeling like that's how they should be feeling after a scientific interaction. Amanda said social pressure on young women is so hard for them to be successful. And that really resonates with me too. And, from my own experiences. So, supporting women, like Tara said, across the whole pipeline from kindergarten when they're fearless all the way up to when, they're winning Nobel Prizes is, I think, so important. And I just want to thank all the panelists for their wonderful contributions.
And last but definitely not least, Dion.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. This has been really enriching for me. I love hearing the different points of view from from my colleagues, these panelists, and as our comments reflect, some disciplines are further along than others. I'm an ecologist. If you're in the natural sciences, the biological sciences, ecological sciences, you may be seeing more success than if you're in engineering and in mathematics and some of the other fields. And I definitely own that we have a long way to go. And my observations are probably biased by the field that I'm in. I think that one takeaway I'd like for listeners to remember is to be mindful that we should be mindful of our own trauma because the girls need us and they're watching us. And you know, the benefit of sitting in a program with so many women is I get to see how that manifests. And sometimes when you haven't addressed traumas, your professional traumas, you revisit them. And so that's where the oxygen mask comment comes from. I think it's really important that we do that. And also when we do that, and as we do that as women professionals, hey, our outcomes become better. We become better professionals at what we're trying to achieve. The other thing I want to mention is that sometimes we hear about people taking another direction because of trauma, and I don't want to diminish that. But I want folks to consider that trauma is not always a directional sign. It's not always an off-ramp from STEM. It may be a stimulus for something else, but it doesn't mean that you don't belong in this field. It doesn't mean that you don't have the opportunity for growth and development. It may just be that thing to get past for you to become the professional that you really, really want to be. So thank you for allowing me to participate today.
Thank you so much. And with that, I would like to thank you all for your wisdom, your attention, your conversation, your thoughts. We are going to take the conversation to our salons right now. Tara also added a link of the full report, STEM Mentoring Supplement, the elements of effective practice for mentoring. So please take advantage of that. And with that, Amanda, Chiara, Tara, Dion, thank you so much for a wonderful panel. And I'm Jason back.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much. I'm going to get emotional. It's just amazing. I wish that we were all together in person. So thank you. What we're going to do now is we're going to break into our salons, which have been already chosen, and hopefully you're not with the same person, and hopefully I have not frozen and you can hear me. So you will be going to your salons for about 45 minutes, and then we'll check back briefly and we'll close for the rest of the day. So thank you.